Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share creepy Reddit horror stories. First story. This story was shared by you/Keeper of Nightfall. My local Wendigo. Well, after all my years of supernatural encounters, I am finally making a Reddit account to post my stories. This is my most recent Wendigo encounter in DeWitt County, Texas. January 12, 2019, around 8 p.m. Now I'm gonna be honest. I chose to go out on this particular night because my town was having a little ghost tour at the haunted hospital. I was lonely and wanted to at least see others having fun. It was 8 p.m. when I left the house and planned to be back within an hour. I have a routine of circling my town in the evening because I just like patrolling and there's always things creeping about after nightfall. I made my way to the haunted hospital, and once I got there I saw flashlights inside the windows and heard laughter. That's nice, I thought. Seeing others have fun made me smile and got rid of some of the loneliness I was feeling. This was the halfway point of my walk and I started my second half heading home now. There were some woods on the opposite side of town now, but nothing impressive until I got to the last quarter of my walk. Now I was passing the baseball field on my left with a large wheat field on my right. This wheat field used to be a large extension of the woods but was cleared out for growing wheat. I continued again and crossed the small bridge that went over a creek and past another section of woods. I was now headed towards an old metal building that has recently been turned into a place for making gates and fences. It was about 9 p.m. now. This building had two small white houses beside it and a stretch of dirt road wrapping around the backside of it before returning to normal asphalt road. Now at night this place seems pretty scary, but this was one of my favorite places to hang out at night and is a normal path I take my walks through. As I was coming up to the dirt road I saw a very tall 8 to 10 foot pale figure, with lanky arms almost dragging the ground, about 40 feet ahead of me briskly walk from the white houses to the woods. I stopped walking. What was that, I thought. Its size confused me so much that I had forgotten my previous encounters with a smaller version of it. After a few minutes of standing there I convinced myself to continue walking forward. I mean, I was an adventurous person and there's no way I was just going to turn tail and go home when I just saw something so odd and out of place. Not even 15 seconds into walking forward this sudden heavy sense of dread overcame me like a giant weight crashing down on my shoulders. My instincts were telling me something was really wrong. I turned my iPhone light on and shined it at the woods. Nothing. I kept walking while keeping my head on a swivel, looking in all directions to keep my surroundings in check. About the 5th or 6th time I looked at the woods I saw it. A huge bleached white humanoid figure crouched on all fours. It was easily still 5 to 6 feet tall even though it was bent over. Its black eyes paralyzed me. It had a big round bald head and an extremely emaciated body, void of all hair, with very long, almost dislocated looking arms and legs. Its legs were like a flamingo bird's at the knee as it bent backwards instead of forward. I took all this in a matter of seconds. Suddenly it reminded me of a praying mantis when it swayed back and forth while staring as if deciding whether to attack or not. This broke me out of my trance and I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I had ran a block. Out of breath and scared as heck I finally took a glance back. I didn't see anything in sight. I didn't hear it chase me either. Maybe it was just stalking those people in those two little white houses and was waiting for me to go away to go back to its business. Maybe it didn't want anything to do with me. But that wasn't the end. I got home, took a shower, and turned out the lights before I hopped in bed when suddenly there was something tapping on my window. Tap tap tap. 3 taps and nothing else. I laid in my bed that night wondering whether it had followed me home or not. A string of bad luck ensued afterwards the following weeks. I was constantly burning stuff on the stove that was relatively easy to make, and I was an excellent cook on top of that. My dog started going nuts at night, growling and barking at night in the living room and at the front door, which she has never ever done, as she is the quietest, sweetest dog you'll ever meet. And finally I got deathly sick for 3 weeks straight with no sure sign of what I had gotten. 103 fever, vomiting with blood, diarrhea with blood, sneezing, coughing, sore throat, migraines, nerve spasms, stuffy and dry nose. It changed constantly, severe stomachaches, aching all over, really especially in my bones, other lesser entities taking advantage of my state trying to latch on to me, and slight insomnia. I've had smaller strings of bad luck before, after hearing its mimicry trying to lure me into the forest, or seeing it one other time, but I didn't see any details, but nothing ever this extreme. I don't go into the woods alone anymore. Sorry it's been so long, guys. After talking to people who know about and study this type of thing, we've come to the solution: it may have been a forest giant. A subcategory of fairy or fae. They have many names and they are not what you expect. I also came to the conclusion there may have been a small one living my house for years. It has been gone for a good while now though. Second story. This story was shared by you/England lover. Wendigo or something else. I've posted a story about this before and I'll copy it in this, but I really want to know what's going on in the woods. I thought it was a Wendigo, but now I'll share my new experience after the old. I live in a small town in the country. There are more cows than people, and some of the buildings are really old. This happened when I was about 8 years old, and this is the first time I brought myself to tell this story, and I only have the courage because I'm far away from the trees. I lived in a valley and the woods surrounded our house on all sides. Now, my entire family has lived in these valleys and hills for generations, and there are countless stories of paranormal things happening to all of us. Several strange things have happened to me, but this is one of the most terrifying. So, living in a small town in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't really anything to do other than hike. I loved hiking and would repeatedly walk in the woods for hours. There was an old story that my great-grandmother told me of a creature that lived in the woods and would stalk anyone who entered. As a kid I thought, yeah right, it was probably just a trick of the trees or something. But this day I stayed out a little later than I intended to and it started getting dark. Turning back I began to walk towards my house when I heard a noise behind me. It wasn't uncommon to see a chipmunk or a bird, but when I turned around there was nothing there. Shrugging it off I continued, but the sounds got louder and louder. You could hear the leaves rustle and the branches snap behind me. I began to get scared. You always hear those stories of kids being kidnapped because they're alone, so I began to run. Not the smartest because I tripped over a branch and fell, skinning my knee pretty bad. Turning around quickly, I thought I was done for, but there was nothing behind me, just trees and leaves. It was dead quiet, even the wind wasn't rustling the leaves, and there wasn't a single bird singing. Feeling pretty silly I got up, brushed myself off and turned to walk the rest of the way home when I saw it. To this day I don't know what it was. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a deer. I live in the country and I know what they look like. This thing was in the distance staring at me. It was covered in fur and had these piercing white eyes, and what looked like horns or antlers were protruding from its head. It knew I saw it because it smiled, and I swear all of its teeth were sharp fangs. I instantly wanted to scream and run, but when I looked into its eyes I was frozen. I couldn't even blink, let alone scream. I could only stand there dumbly as it got closer and closer. The closer it got, the more bony it looked. Its limbs were long and it looked starved. It stank like rotting flesh and I felt like crying, but I couldn't. I honestly thought I was done for until it stopped. Its head tilted and it just looked at me, then turned and walked away. When it left I could move again, and when I thought I could walk without falling I ran home. I shut myself in my room and bawled my eyes out for hours. I didn't go back in the woods for years, and even now I'm weary of it. I don't know what it was or why it was there, but I got the message loud and clear: stay away. That happened well over 10 years ago and was really the only major experience I had in the woods. Until recently. Now growing up I've seen more strange things in the woods than I can count. But most of them aren't anything to be concerned with, except recently something dark has been moving in the woods. It looks like a man sometimes but will change shape. It ducks in between trees and hides just on the edge of where the woods are. I thought I was crazy, but my close friends have seen it too. This thing seems to give off an evil feeling. One of my friends were pushed down the hill and swears that she saw this dark entity out of the corner of her eye when it happened. Another of my friends swears they heard laughter coming from the trees. This thing gives me the creeps. I'm not sure if this shadow man is the same creature that I thought was a Wendigo or not, but it definitely isn't friendly. Does anyone have any idea what this thing is? Is it the Wendigo, or are they two different entities? Third story. Skinwalker sighting in central Scotland. Okay, first off, I know a lot of people will think that this is a hoax because it's in Scotland, but I don't know how to explain this. I'm extremely familiar with Wendigos, skinwalkers, fleshgates, all that crap, and there's probably a not Native American possibility that I'm unaware of, but the only explanation to me is a skinwalker. I apologize for my use of Scots slang in advance. I'm a teenager, won't disclose age, and I go to a public high school in Perthshire, Scotland. It's mostly a rural area, with mostly towns, villages, and just houses dotting the landscape, although there are two major cities in my area. The high school I go to is in a medium-ish sized town, and for privacy reasons, I will not disclose its name. Not many people have had many paranormal encounters, although a few people claim to have seen ghosts and whatnot. Anyways, on to my encounter. I live in a large-ish house in the middle of a field with my family. It's not too far from the town I go to school in, but I usually take the bus in just 'cause I'm a lazy git. Sometimes, me and my mates, let's call them E, J, and C, take a path through a nearby forest to come back to my place, where we just play video games, that sorta shit. This particular night, my parents were out of town and we decided to drink a bit of booze that we had in the mini fridge in my room. I didn't try much, I'm not much of a drinker, and beer's not my thing, or C's, really. E and J, however, they went all out. It got really late, or rather, early, and they decided to leave and head home. I said bye to them, then headed back up to my room to play some more video games. About half an hour later, I heard a loud banging on my door. It was J and E. I let them in, and they started panicking. C goes home a different way to them, he lives a bit closer to me than the others. E and J said that they were walking through the woods and they saw a tall, skinny-looking bloke pelting it towards them. They panicked and legged it back to my house, while the skinny fella gave chase. My mind went back to when another friend, somewhat of a paranormal buff, told me about Wendigos and skinwalkers. I called 999 and said that a prowler was lurking around our house and had chased my mates back to my house. I gave the operator my address and said that they'd have a car or two to my house in an hour and a half. Apparently there was a big traffic incident. In the meantime, she said, arm yourselves, lock all doors and windows and lock yourself in a room. We did that, grabbing knives from the kitchen and barricading ourselves inside my bedroom. After a while, we heard heavy footsteps around our house, and thinking it was the police, I peered out of the window. What I saw was much worse. It was E. It looked exactly the same as her. I knew that she was sitting crying in my room. I freaked out and it saw me. WH at the HELISS that TH in whatever the fuck was outside could speak, and it sounded exactly like J. It was a skinwalker. I remember the description from my horror weirdo friend. It looked like my friend, but sounded like my other friend. It must have been confused, and that made it scarier. We heard sirens and the thing ran off into the woods. We told the police officers everything, and they checked it out. The officers left, after saying the woods were clear, then muttered something about fucking prank callers. After they left, we heard an inhuman shriek, but sort of human-like. We didn't sleep at all that night. I believe that what we saw was a skinwalker. I hope to God Almighty that I never have to face that bloody thing again. However, if I do, I shall make a follow-up. Thank you. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/FortuneNo1557. Possible Wendigo encounter. I've posted this in another sub, but I'm not sure which is the right place. Hey everyone, not sure if this is the right place to post this, but I'm definitely spooked. Also my very first Reddit post, so sorry if it's a little jumbled. So today my friend, let's call her Ray, and I were in my car at night, windows rolled down and screaming our heads off to loud music. We were feeling absolutely happy, laughing and having a great time overall while driving around the rich neighborhoods looking at huge mansions. Now, here comes what spooked us majorly. We start getting a little put off because of how dark this road was, plus we were going into the middle of a forested area and everything around us was getting darker and darker. I had to turn on the brights on my car. Now, we still didn't say anything to each other seriously, only joking about being a little nervous and getting weird vibes. I make the mistake of turning down a forked road, and immediately we feel sick to our stomachs, both at the same time. I just looked at her and we both started saying about how something is not right. It was such an urgent feeling of terror, dread, knowing something terrible was going to happen if we stopped the car. We felt like we had to roll the windows up because we wanted to be safer. Once we finally sped back around and started leaving, I felt an intense feeling of something watching us, and I just could not make myself turn to look to my side into the forest or behind us. The second we got off that road it felt like a weight came off our shoulders, again at the same time. I've never felt this terrified before, with such a huge pit in my stomach and sense of dread. What was that? Seriously. I have no idea what happened or why we started feeling that way suddenly. I'm so scared, even just thinking about it gives me goosebumps all over. Has anyone else experienced something like this, or do you know what it might have been? Edit. Sorry for my lack of education on what wendigos, or other creatures of that sort actually are. I heard from people around me that that's the feeling you get when they are around you, but I might be totally wrong. Something was definitely up though, whatever it was. Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Jamie007dog. Well, I saw it. Hi. I don't really know how to start this post, it's my first one. At the time of writing this I am living in western Pennsylvania, a little south of Pittsburgh. I was in Boy Scouts for most of my life, so I feel very comfortable in the woods and go camping often. Upon hearing Governor Wolf's school closure plan, I decided that it was time for some cold weather camping. It was March, it wasn't that cold, but it did drop to 40 degrees at night, and the people who I went weren't really avid campers. If you're from Pittsburgh you may know the Boggs campsite on the Montour Trail, that's where we went. They, of course, only brought weed and alcohol and didn't bring any sleeping bags, blankets, or pillows, so naturally I assumed they were gonna have to sit by the fire all night. It was light when we first got there and the fire pit was still smoldering, very cool. We used the coals from the previous camper's fire to light ours, and immediately I knew that I would have to provide wood for the fire until I went to bed. They passed out beers at around 3 p.m. Times are gonna be a bit dodgy because I wasn't near my phone, and after having 2 to 3 beers I just wanted dinner. Now, that they did for me. They made ramen noodles and cheese, which was amazing. They had a weird name for it, and burgers over the fire. By this time it would have had to have been close to 5 p.m. because it started to rain a little bit, as was forecasted, so we took shelter in the lean-to shelter that was on site, and occasionally one of them would throw some sticks on the fire. Sticks were all they seemed to be able to find, even though I brought 2 saws and an axe, and I would cut up some logs. By the time the rain stopped, all 4 of us smoked a blunt and were sitting around the fire. I was light out, so we'll call it 7 p.m. After a while of just hanging out, they asked if I had any blankets. I always have blankets. Nothing special, but we've had some pretty bad snow storms in the past, and a couple scratchy car blankets are always useful. They each got a blanket except for R, as we'll call him, who got my summer sleeping bag that I brought just in case. By now it was dark, 9 to 9:30 p.m., and the fire was getting low. I start off to find some more wood because they wanted to smoke another blunt. Now you have to understand that I'm 6 feet 5 inches and a semi-frequent user of the devil's lettuce, so my tolerance is kinda high. I return with the wood and we spark up another blunt, a smaller one, and just kinda hang out and talk and listen to music while we're high as shit. Good times. Eventually the fire, again, dies down a little bit, and, again, it's my job to get more wood. Because we had been there for a while and there were people there before us, most of the wood near the shelter was either really small or all used up, so I had to keep going farther and farther away from camp to find wood. 12:30 a.m., close to 50 F still, so we're all doing well. I have a flashlight, a really nice one that I use for scuba diving, that is kinda bright, so I use it on the low setting on land. At this point I'm far enough away from camp that my friends can't really see me. There's like an embankment between the Montreux Trail and someone's driveway that you have to cross to get to more woods, but I'm comfortable alone because I knew what I was doing and they could FS hear me if I needed them. I start to hear a weird whistling sound, kinda like someone inhaling through a snorkel, but I chalk it up to the wind. The air was starting to get kinda cold, so I just took back what I had and put some on the fire. 1 to 2 a.m., 40 F with some wind, nothing severe. I have on 2 long sleeve shirts and an army surplus coat that is super warm, but my friends are in windbreakers and hoodies and, oh yeah, it's raining. Off to get more wood. This time I started taking into consideration the type of wood that I would collect. There was a lot of pine, but that burns fast, which is why I had to go collect it so often. The stretch of woods near the driveway was pretty much all pine, a few maples, but nothing big. So I keep walking knowing that this area has both conifers and deciduous trees in close proximity to each other. As I'm wandering and collecting wood, I notice that the rain has turned to a super fine snow. Time to head back, just in case it picks up. Then the whistling started again, a lot louder now. Okay, weird, there isn't any more wind than there was before, maybe it changed directions. I keep walking. By now I can hear the music from camp and pick up the pace a little bit. Just as I summit the embankment and prepare to clamber down the other side, a loud noise echoes behind me. Tree fell. Shining my flashlight around, I couldn't see any signs that that was the case and didn't see any source. Deer knocked something over. In my head it doesn't matter because I'm back at camp anyways and I can try the marsh behind our shelter next time. 3 a.m. They were cold. The temperature dropped to around 30 F and the wind and snow had picked up. Car blankets helped the boys a little bit, but they weren't able to go sleep in the tent that I brought without freezing, except for R, who slept like a rock all night after about 3:30. We decide to finish off the weed and give the last beers a good talking to. 4:30 a.m. I'm about ready for bed at this point because I'm not super high or drunk or anything, but I was definitely tired. I offer to go collect more wood before I retire to my 0-degree sleeping bag and cot. I camp comfy when I don't have to carry it far, and they said they would join me. They must have been cold. We split up and I end up heading back to where I was before, except this time I left my flashlight on high and I made a bunch of noise to scare off that deer or whatever that was there earlier. I end up a little further away from camp than I had intended to be because there were only pine branches on the ground over here. Then the whistling starts again. This time I could tell the direction it was coming from, my left, and shined my flashlight around that area before just returning to collecting wood. Then the sound stops briefly, then picks up again in a different direction less than a minute later, this time in front of me and a little to the right, back into the pines. Maybe the branches of certain trees catch the wind just right and make the noise, I think, whatever, and move on. Then on my way back the noise was following me, darting from left to right but always like right behind me. I don't see anything, so whatever. Then the noise makes like one sharp whistle and pauses, then I hear it. Damn, it's cold out here. It was R, but I couldn't find him with my flashlight, so I called, "Where you at?" and it sounded like he turned around because I heard a branch snap and a bit of movement. I pointed my flashlight at where the sound was coming from and I didn't see R anywhere. Maybe he's behind a bush or a tree or something. I call out again, "R," no reply this time. Yikes. He might be lost or something because we weren't at camp and he saw my flashlight moving, so he came to look. "R, where are you?" Nothing. Then, louder, "I'm going back to camp," because I thought he was trying to scare me. Shining my flashlight around one last time, I spot something dive into a bush about 40 feet from where I had heard Art turn around. "I see you, big man, grab some wood and come back." He's 6 foot and 230 to 250 pounds. I shine the light around for a few more seconds, then turn around again and start walking. The whistling is back. Cool, love that. No matter what speed I moved at, it always seemed the same distance away. I decide that I just kinda sit under a tree and wait for R to pass by because he had to come back sometime, right? I wanted to save the battery of my flashlight, so I turned it off and closed one eye, so it would adjust faster. By now the snow had picked up a good bit, which is another reason to stop, in case R got lost. I couldn't really see super far because there was a lot of cloud cover despite it being a full moon. The whistling never got closer, but it did start to move around a little bit, in a really odd circle. It would start in one spot, stop, then promptly start in another spot that was in a different direction. I realized that it had to be the wind or something because it was moving super fast and was moving at random. Cool, now where the fuck is R? I turn on my flashlight between whistles and call out again, "R." It's important to note here that the whistling never picked up while I looked around, it normally only stopped for a second or two. It was super quiet. The snow was laying on the ground and we had 2 to 3 in on the ground by now, so maybe that muffled it. Anyways, upon not hearing R, I thought that maybe I missed him or didn't hear him at all and started to head back to camp. As I stood up and brushed the dirt off my ass, I shined the flashlight around one more time. I was thinking in my head, I definitely heard him. After I stood up with the wood in my arms and began to walk back towards camp, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. My flashlight, being a diving light, has a wrist mount that I was wearing so I could use it and carry things. I turned towards and scanned the area with my flashlight. Nothing. Fucking deer. Not even 4 steps more and I saw another movement. Now the whistling was back. Damn, that gets annoying. Sounds like a fat guy who just ran up the stairs. Flashlight was on low so I could see maybe 40 feet around me and didn't see anything, but I knew it was time to pick up the pace. Now the whistling was followed by flashes of movement. Great, it's not the wind. At this point I'm speed walking, being tall I can move if I have to, and I was definitely traveling at jogging speed. A lumbering beast when he runs, could not move this fast or this quietly through the woods. Nice, another thing that it's not. I decided to turn off the flashlight and move into some brush that was close by, not sure why, but I was getting a little weirded out and had the shakes even though I was warm. It was silent again. Well, fuck me, what is it? Is it hunting me? Coyote? Not a coyote. There was a good period of silence, then there was whistling. This time it wasn't doing circles around me, it was just moving around where I had turned off the flashlight. My eyes adjusted and I peeked out from under the bush that I was rolled up under. I tried. Nothing, just that damned whistling. By this point I was pretty much sober, like if I got pulled over I could nail the field sobriety test. I waited for a little while the thing just kinda looked around. Then I heard it speak. In a really gargled impression of me it called out, "Big man." It took everything I had not to panic. Holy shit. Not human, not a deer, not the wind. Oh fuck. Then it spoke again, cutting off really strangely like you just lifted the needle off of a record, but picking back up again with "back to camp" still in my voice. My fucking voice. I normally don't like hearing recordings of myself anyways, but now I really don't like them. It said a few more things, in different voices that I didn't recognize. All the voices were either talking about how cold it was or questions like, "What was that?" and "Stop fucking with me," but they all seemed like whoever was talking had some phlegm built up in their throat. Then it went quiet. I poked my head out of the bushes again and saw something sitting against a tree in the same position I had been in, left leg straight out, right leg at an angle, hands behind my head. It could have fooled me as being we both kinda sit the same way, except his ADHD usually makes him fidget with his hands. Okay, so who's sitting in the woods with me? I lay there, silent, and just watch. It begins to whistle, so that's where that was coming from. It moves its hand around in a fist out in front of it, the same way that I look around with my flashlight, and then started to stand up. Oh, it's tall. I only weigh 166, skin and bone mostly, so when I say that this thing was skinny, don't take it lightly. I could see how thin its long spindly arms were silhouetted against the snow that coated a bush behind it. When it stood up it was hunched over, not sure if I was slouching when I stood up, but I certainly do slouch. It walked a few paces away from the tree and stood up the whole way. Holy shit. I worked with backdrops for theater productions, and the walls we use the most are around 8 feet high, and this thing would have easily been able to see over one. I'm talking by at least a foot. It slowly peered around, no hair on its head, and its side profile showed a super disfigured skull. The jaw hung pretty far down and there weren't really lips that stuck out, but it was hard to tell because of how dark it was. It let out one final Big man, kinda like someone with tortures would say it, because they were just random words that it strung together. Then it screamed. My dad used to take me to air shows a lot as a kid, and this has to have been the same pitch and volume as an F-16. I couldn't move. It peered around, head just seemingly sweeping the area. Then it crouches down and leaps for a tree with the lowest branch being around 10 to 15 feet and lands feet first on one of the branches and sits there, squatting, whistling, and just staring around. Then it takes off. Faster than should be allowed in nature. I count to 10 in my head. The forest sleeps. I slowly make my way out from under the bush and begin to creep back towards camp, this time avoiding using my flashlight or making any noise if possible. I climbed the embankment and take one last look towards the woods, unsure if that just happened or if I was asleep. I tumbled down the other side of the embankment and returned to the relative safety of the big-ass fire with Y and J, the other two who went for wood. "Where's your wood?" asks Y. "Oh, it, had bugs." "It's fine, we got a lot anyways." They stacked up a solid pile of oak and pine, not enough for the night but enough for a little while at least. "Where's our?" I ask warily. "Check the tent, there." He was passed the fuck out snoring the way he always does. "Well, okay then." I climbed into my sleeping bag to warm up a little bit because I was covered in snow when I got back and it screamed again. "Oh, please don't tell me it's coming here." The other two looked at me wide-eyed. Normally if I recognize a sound I say what it is out loud so they know what's up. I had no response. They asked if I heard the first one. Good, they heard it too. I answered with a nod as I unlocked the car in case we needed to book it. They asked if I saw it. Nod. What was it? No fucking clue. I described it to them quietly so that I could listen for more noises, and I told them about it imitating my voice. Y was pretty freaked out. Jay thought I was bullshitting him and said it was some kind of owl. I got out of my sleeping bag, threw my coat back on and joined them at the fire. For the first time in a while I looked at my phone, 5:45 a.m. We looked up native owl calls and came up empty-handed. The same happened with every other animal we tried. Jay seemed a little nervous. Y suggested that, maybe it's a truck on the highway. Yeah, that's probably it, I replied blankly, and Jay gave me a look that said that he knew it probably wasn't. They didn't sleep. I forced sleep upon myself so that we wouldn't die on the car ride home. The next morning we went for a walk. It didn't snow much after I got back, so you could kind of follow my footprints. The tree the thing leapt into was out of reach of me on Jay's shoulders. R was still asleep, but I think I might have been able to reach it if I was on his. The tree I sat under had scratch marks on it. I think they're from deer shedding the velvet off of their antlers, but it creeped me out nonetheless. The tree it sat under had footprints everywhere. There seemed to be no order to them at all. It was amazing. It looked like it had run over every square inch of that area, coming as close to the bush I was in as 2 lengths. I don't really know much about cryptids or anything, but when I got home I googled North American tall skinny cryptid, and the second result was from Parade, a list of cryptids. After ruling out everything else on the list, I came across the picture of a Wendigo that has antlers, not quite but pretty close described as tall and skinny and super fast. I did my research and every picture has antlers, but I can't find any evidence that, other than a few movies, it had antlers. IDK. What I saw definitely didn't have antlers, but it matched everything else, even down to the whistling. This was kinda long, but I'd appreciate some feedback. I posted this first on another subreddit, r/cryptids, but it wasn't received well. Sixth story. This story was shared by you/groovy_cryptid. Never been more glad to have a bear nearby. Sorry for the wall of text, I'm not very good at summarizing. My family recently bought a beautiful, but overgrown piece of land in the Kootenays of British Columbia, Canada. It's a wonderful place, but my dad is frustrated with the amount of work they will have to do to live comfortably on our land. I personally love our little pocket of untouched nature, but I'm getting off topic. I thought it was strange that the previous owners seemed to be in a rush to sell the land, but I chalked it up to the uneven ground and abundance of plants. My family brought their trailer to the land, and were staying in it, while I set up a small tent nearby since there wasn't enough room for me. Soon after we started staying there, my dad and I were comfortably sitting around our fire pit stargazing and listening to the sounds of the land, when we started to hear the shrieks of something that was certainly inhuman, but also unlike any animal either of us have ever heard. It was a shrill, yet guttural growl, that was extremely drawn out and loud. My first guess was that a bear or cougar got cornered, but listening more closely quickly crushed that assumption. I started to distinguish the growl of a small bear, but that wasn't the source of the strange shriek. It soon started to sound like a bear was cornering something, and the threatened creature was trying to make a last-ditch escape while screaming in pain. Now I know you're probably thinking it must have been a cougar or something, but I have heard a cougar in a fight before. This was not a cougar. Its shrieks and howls sounded almost demonic. Soon after the noises stopped, my dad and I both decided it would be best to head to bed. While laying in my tent, I started to hear the unmistakable sound of a large creature roaming around our site. After approaching, I heard it settle into place, almost like it was sitting down and getting comfortable. I started to worry that the unidentifiable creature from earlier was stalking me, until I worked up the courage to peek out my tent's window. In the spot I heard the creature approach, I saw not a horrifying monstrosity, but a beautiful black bear. I would normally be afraid upon seeing this, except, I made eye contact with the bear and felt an overwhelming sense of safety. I know this sounds crazy, but it almost felt like the bear was watching over us, to protect us from something. Soon after noticing the bear, I heard the blood-curdling screech of the unidentifiable creature, much closer now. When the bear heard this, it tensed up, brought itself to its feet and began to growl menacingly. Only a moment after the bear began to growl, I heard a much larger creature than the bear run off in the opposite direction. I swung my head to see where the noise was coming from, and got a glance of an incredibly large deer-like animal. I didn't get a good look at it, but I remember seeing thin, skeletal, long pale arms, and legs that ended with hooves. It was also covered in a very dark, blood-like substance, implying that it had been injured recently. When I saw this, my breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't force myself to look away. I saw the trees sway and break where it was running, and then it stopped a far distance away from our land, and let out one more shriek. The few birds that were awake in that area flew away in fear, and I shuddered. I looked back to the bear, and it was once again sitting, looking at me with its kind protective eyes. I have never been more grateful to have a bear living nearby, and I no longer fear them, but I respect them. 7th story. This story was shared by you/Bradley Innovates. My Wendigo encounter. This story takes place in the back country of the area I grew up in. Be warned. Some of this might be too frightening for some. Reader discretion is advised. So back in 2019 I remember there being a big uproar of unknown creatures roaming the forest, like Bigfoot and skinwalkers. But this story isn't about them. This story is about probably one of the scariest things I think I've ever heard about. The Wendigo. A few months after one of my friends Jacob mentioned this big uproar, I went to go see him since I had been away enlisted in the United States Marines. I got back after being discharged and one of the first things I did was go and see him. We're having a good old time and he brought up the idea of going out to a little hangout spot his now ex-girlfriend took him to when they wanted to get away for a few hours. So I decided why not, so I grabbed my gun and we went out to this extremely secluded area and started messing around on the old dock that was there. It had been pretty much forgotten by the looks of it, poorly maintained and some boards were almost completely rotted through. So about 30 minutes into our shenanigans, Jacob brought up the topic of the Wendigo. The name sounded a little scary even for me. Curious, I asked him about it. He said that if you went into the woods and said Wendigo 3 times you would come across the scariest looking thing you've ever seen. Me calling his bluff, I told him to prove it. To this day, I wished I hadn't. We start walking on this little path that lead deep into the thick woods close to the Alabama state line. We walked for maybe 20-ish minutes and decided we were in a good spot. I feel it's worth knowing that it had been raining a lot over the past couple days, so the ground was completely saturated with water. I turned to Jacob and he dares me to do it. I stood there, in complete silence. The rest of the forest was almost silent as well besides the tall pines swaying in the wind high above our heads. Reluctantly, I slowly started to say it. Wendigo. 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 Then. Nothing happened. I let out a silent sigh of relief at the fact that nothing happened. One thing about mine and Jacob's friendship is we loved it when one of us proved the other wrong about something. In our friendship of 10 years, I think it was one of the first times I had proven him wrong at anything. We started to talk a little bit of shit back and forth at each other when we heard a noise in the distance. Me still having the reflexes I had from the Marines, I immediately snapped towards the direction of the noise, that were just then turning into noises. I started to move closer to then noises and then shortly after we saw a few coyotes running across the path about 30 feet in front of us. I breathed another sigh of relief, but that relief didn't last long since I knew something was up. I didn't know what was up at first, but I just knew it was time for me and Jacob to leave. As we turned to leave the woods, all of a sudden, a tall pine tree started to groan and creak as it started to come down. Noticing this, and in a moment of pure instinct, I shoved Jacob forward as the tree came falling through the rest of the branches and landed right in between us. Jacob let out a cry of terror as the tree landed and I hopped the tree to get to him. I could feel his heart pounding like a drum as I grabbed him by his shirt and yanked him to his feet. He was still terrified and still practically crying as I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Move, Jacob. Move now." I spun him around really hard, causing him to fall to his knees. I quickly got him up and we both started to sprint down the path back in the direction we came. I didn't dare look back, and neither did Jacob. I was sprinting through the woods when a familiar sound came from behind me. "Jacob! Jacob, come quick!" It was the sound of Jacob's younger sister Olivia. He turned and tried to get past me, the whole time he was screaming, "Olivia!" I stopped him and said, "Jacob! Look at me. It's not her. Do you hear me? It's not her." Just then another pine tree started to buckle. I saw it just in time to tackle Jacob down to the ground as both of us were nearly crushed. I screamed at Jacob once more. "Go! Get out of here! Go now!" As I was screaming that I pulled my gun out of my waistband and aimed it down the trail in the direction from whence we came. Jacob made it to the opening of the trail and turned back and noticed I was still aiming my gun down the trail. "Bradley, get out of there! Come on, hurry!" I turned and started sprinting towards him. As I made it into the clearing a good 50 feet, I turned and me and Jacob both saw it. The thing we had ushered into showing itself. The Wendigo. It stood about 9 feet tall on its hind legs. There was practically no meat on its bones, it had really skinny legs and even skinnier arms. Its skin a pale white, almost like a vampire's. But the thing I noticed the most about it were the eyes. A vibrant blue, almost like lightsaber blue for those who have seen Star Wars. Having had enough fear, I raised my gun and fired at the Wendigo. Jacob, not sticking around to see if I had killed it, turned and ran towards the car. I turned and did the same thing as he passed me. That was my first experience with this so-called Wendigo, and I pray, almost every night I never have to encounter something that terrifying again. 8th story. This story was shared by you/Heisentlay87. Let's discuss Wendigos and how they've gone from the humanoid cannibal monsters of Algonquin legend to the freaky deer cryptids of pop culture. And if we have any Native or First Nations folk here, please do give us your input, because as a white British woman I do feel I may be treading on some toes. I first heard of the Wendigo when reading an article several years ago about Wendigo psychosis, what was described as a cultural mass hysteria that occurred when individuals in certain tribes who had committed cannibalism or were facing starvation began to act violently, believing they were Wendigos. This article went on to briefly state the Wendigo legend, and to my understanding the myth was that the Wendigo was one of two entities. 1. A spirit that possessed people suffering from starvation in winter, driving them to commit cannibalism. 2. A person who had indeed resorted to cannibalism and was transformed by their wicked deed, becoming an emaciated humanoid that was unable to satiate their hunger and hunted humans to eat. But over the last couple of years I've been seeing all sorts of claims that Wendigos are deer-like, look like zombie deer, are humanoids with antlered skulls or some such amalgamation that usually involves cervine features and antlers. I can't seem to find anything reliable that says this is a traditional or cultural description of the Wendigo. However, I did notice that Wendigos and skinwalkers are often lumped into the same lot, as it were, and skinwalkers are far more varied in appearance. As a skinwalker is an individual able to shape-shift with the use of magic and animal pelts, not unlike a berserker, I suppose. They certainly could have a cervine appearance. The most compelling tales I've read and heard tend to involve canine shapes, but I can't help but think from the things I've read that a skinwalker is more likely to be antlered than a Wendigo. So where has this pop culture image of the antlered Wendigo come from? I invite you to share your knowledge, research and resources here. My personal theory is that the Wendigo and skinwalker legends have become blurred, causing confusion. Aesthetically, ungulate skulls are particularly creepy, so it also makes sense that artists would enjoy using that imagery in their work, further perpetuating this description. For the record, if anyone is able to share some good information that contradicts my suggestion, I'm open to hearing it and always enjoy learning new information about folklore, myth, and the paranormal. But I've seen plenty of disagreement on what constitutes a Wendigo lately, and I thought it might be a good thing to have an intelligent discussion on the subject. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.